Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I'm back in the booth again for another live sneak peek preview for this week's audiobook release here on Say with Jay. Now, I know lots of you think that I'm just the veritable picture of calm reserve and self-restraint. But this week, I'm really excited for our audiobook release because it's taking place in one of my favorite places on Earth, Sweetwater, North Dakota. Now, I hear you, but Sweetwater's a fictional place. That's true, but it's special to me because it's where it all began. My very first audiobook with Jessie Gussman was the first book in her Sweetwater Ranch Western Cowboy romance series, The Cowboy's Best Friend, and to this day, it's still one of our most popular audiobooks. We went on to record books 2 through 10 of that series, and then we switched off to a different series. If memory serves, it was a Christmas romance series, and we were wanting to take advantage of the calendar and the upcoming holiday season. And life being what it was, we never went back and recorded the final book in that series. Now, I know some of our more astute fans here will recognize that Jessie's latest series, Coming Home to North Dakota, also takes place in Sweetwater. And we also have a Sweetwater romance novella available, The Cowboy's Second Chance, which Jessie wrote later as a follow-up to the original series. But this week on Say with Jay, I'm really excited that we are going back and finishing up Book 11 of the Sweetwater Ranch series, The Cowboy's Marriage Mistake. The Cowboy's Marriage Mistake is the story of Cordell Stryker, Cord to his friends, and the Stryker brothers have been featured throughout the series, and Rosaline Bloom, Rosie to her friends, the town librarian there in Sweetwater. She and Cord are lifelong best friends, but she's also had a crush for about that length of time on Cord. The book opens and finds Rosie despondent because Cord, like many men in this series, has received a mysterious letter that's generating some pressure for him to get married, and not wanting to risk his dear friendship with Rosie, has proposed marriage to her identical twin sister, Rosalind. The scene that we're going to preview today takes place after Rosie almost embarrassingly admits to her crush on Cord during a sleigh ride at the Sweetwater Christmas Festival, and to escape the situation, accepts a late-night snowmobile ride with Max Martinez, a relative newcomer in town from Texas, who is both unfamiliar with the area and North Dakota winters. The snowmobile ride doesn't go well, and they wind up stranded several miles in the middle of scenic nowhere south of town. Rosie reaches out to Cord to come rescue her, and these are the results. So, sit back, enjoy, and don't forget, The Cowboy's Marriage Mistake will be out this Friday on Say with Jay. Thanks. The car console said 1:43 a.m. He couldn't call Rem at this time of night, although he dearly wanted to, just to find out what kind of man his brother actually was. Rem was a good, honest man, but that didn't mean his brother was the same. Next time, he'd be a little more forceful in not allowing Rosie to just take off with anyone. Although, of course, he knew, short of holding her down, he hadn't had a choice. She'd never given him the right to tell her what to do. She probably never would. Of course not. He could have asked her to stay. Should have. She might have done it out of respect for their years of friendship. Rosalind was headstrong and would do her own thing no matter what he said. but Rosie was a lot quieter and more considerate, although determined in her own way. Still, he should have tried, given how badly it sat with him for her to go with Max. He scanned the snow-covered ground on either side of the road as he drove slowly out of town, trying to keep his mind from imagining the worst. Rosie was a smart girl, a native. She would walk east until she came to the road. Once there, she would turn north and walk toward Sweetwater, or wait for him to find her. Hopefully, she kept walking. It wouldn't take long to freeze in these temperatures. And just like that, his heart thundered in his chest again, and his foot wanted to slam the accelerator to the floor, like going fast would help him look for her better. After driving for several miles, he began to wonder how far south he should go before he turned around and started back north. Had he missed her? Maybe she didn't really know where she was after all. Maybe he should have alerted the volunteer fire and rescue department and had a whole party of people searching. He just decided that's exactly what he was going to do and was reaching for his phone when it buzzed. "I'm at the road." His stomach relaxed just slightly. He knew better than to text and drive, but the road was deserted and straight as a skinny woman's shadow. "I'm several miles south of SW. Think you're farther?" "Yes." 2 seconds later, he saw a dark form along the edge of the road. He turned the heater on high and slowed the car, stopping so the passenger door was right beside her. She just stood, though, not grabbing for the door right away, so he put his hazard lights on and got out, striding around. "Rosie?" "Hey, thanks for coming." He didn't stop until he had his arms wrapped around her. She hugged him back, so he assumed that her arms weren't frozen at least. "Glad I gave you that hat," he said, his head lowered and his lips pressed against the soft hair that fell over her ear. "Me too. It saved my bacon." Her breath fanned against his neck where her head was buried, and suddenly, his heart was pounding harder than it had been when he worried she was lost. "Oh, that's what you have in your head, huh? I'll have to remember that. Romance novels turns brains to bacon." He nuzzled his lips against her ear, so relieved he shook. "Shut up and keep looking happy to see me." He felt her smile against his neck, and a soft touch that might have been her tongue but couldn't have been because it was Rosie, and it just couldn't have been. "I am happy to see you." He didn't even try to pretend he wasn't happy as his hands moved over her coat and down her back, like they couldn't really believe he'd found her and she was safe. He didn't try to contain his relief either, which seemed to spread and thicken inside his soul. He could have lost her. "I think I've got you beat in that department." "No way." His hand stopped. "You're shaking. Cold?" he asked, looking down into her eyes in question, although he knew she had to be. "No, it must be relief. I didn't even think I was scared." She smiled tremulously up at him, her arms tightening around him at the same time. He didn't have any thoughts in his head. No plan. In fact, his brain had shut completely off. That's the only excuse he had for what happened next, as his head lowered and the distance between them disappeared. He'd kissed his fiancée, several times in fact, but comparisons weren't in his mind either. Maybe it was the love of life, or feelings of survival and beating the odds. Maybe it was the after effects of fear and adrenaline. Maybe it was the Christmas season and all the couples he'd seen kissing under the mistletoe that evening as he gave his sleigh rides. There were a lot of things he could blame it on. but his mind wasn't working anyway. All he could do was feel. The lips, warm and soft, under his. The slightly trembling body. The brush of her skin, and the taste that felt so right he couldn't do anything but sink deeper, holding her tighter, feeling her respond, and needing to meet her with his whole body and spirit. Maybe it was the howl of a wolf way off in the distance, but more likely it was that he needed to breathe. They both needed to breathe. They ripped apart, pulling back at the same time. Rosie stumbled and put the back of her wrist to her lips, holding it there. Her breath was a cloud around her face. Her eyes were wide and shocked and maybe a little betrayed as they hung on him, searching him out through the clouds of breath. He could only stare, his trembling worse, his heart galloping, his mind whirling and his chest full of shock, of heat, of guilt. The guilt exploded, slapping everything else down. "I'm sorry." Guilt pushed those words out. She shook her head, like she'd been in a daze, but his words had snapped her out of it. "No, don't be. That was me. I was just, happy to be found. Yeah, I would have kissed anyone. Probably even Max if he were here. He was right behind me, actually." She looked one way, then another, then turned completely around. "I thought he was." Cord wasn't too concerned about Max. A man like that usually landed on his feet. Still, he'd look for him. In a minute. He needed to do damage control first. "That was just relief, probably, on both our parts." "Yeah, that's what I was saying. Relief." "I mean, it just felt like friends kissing." "Yeah, friends." She finally moved her wrist from her face. "Yuck, actually. It was a yucky friend kiss." "Yuck, yes, that's what I was thinking. Yuck. Friends are relieved to find each other, yucky kiss. That kind of kiss." "Yes, exactly. People do it all the time." "They do?" "Only once, because it's so yucky they can't even think about doing it again." "Oh, right. Yes, me too. Too yucky to think about doing it again." "What kind of man says yucky?" Max's voice came out of the darkness. It sounded like he was shivering. The kind of man who just kissed his best friend and really liked it. In fact, really liked it wasn't nearly strong enough for how he felt, even though he was engaged to marry her twin sister. That kind of man. That was the kind of man who would say just about anything to figure out what in the world he was doing. Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.